So she's calling in. Okay, thank you. We will give this as our 10-second warning. Thank you. Welcome to our December 6, 2012 Gilbert Town Council study session. We have 4 agenda items. The first one is to review, in preparation for Thursday night, our town council meeting. We begin by looking at the presentations and proclamations, and prior to that, Councilmember Cook, if you could be the introduction part and find the scouts and one to lead us in the pledge. On the Pillar of the Month, Councilmember Peterson. On the second item, recognition of First Bank, Vice Mayor Sens. 2A and 2B are together, and that could be Councilmember Daniels. And then agenda item 3, the presentation of the 12 Ks of Christmas Spirit, will be Mayor Lewis. Not listed, but we'll put this as a future meeting topic. I have had several citizens asking me about the Balloon Fest, and we'll just informally have a 3A. Melanie, can you plan on doing a Balloon Fest update? And Councilmember Ray can be on deck if need be on that. Does that work? Any questions about that first part? Okay. Councilmember Cooper, what topics, agenda items would you like to discuss?
Item 11.
11?
Yep.
Okay. Councilmember Peterson?
5 and 10, Mayor.
Vice Mayor Sens?
None.
Councilmember Cook? Councilmember Ray?
None.
Okay, thank you. Let's start with 5.
Mayor, maybe a quick, it's short, I'm sure, but maybe a brief on what it's about. Can we get that, or should I just dive in? The bleachers. No?
I apologize. I thought I was passed. I was so excited. The loan agreement was created with the town of Gilbert to look at allowing the Higley School District use of a set of bleachers that were removed from the county landfill area that used to be used as a rodeo park. We've been storing them in our north yard with no opportunity for use within our park system. We reached out to the school districts to see who may be interested. There was definitely an interest and a need by the Higley School District, and so therefore we pursued discussions with them on how we could facilitate kind of a good neighborly relationship and let them use the equipment and make good use of it without it just sitting in our yard. We did explore what it would look like to dispose of it by auction. Some of the reports that we received is that when some bleachers have gone to auction, they've only received about $145. So that seemed to make a better use for someone to get more value out of them by being able to utilize them who had a need. So we pursued the loan agreement. The loan agreement was reviewed by the school board for Higley. They have accepted and signed the agreement currently, and so it will be up to your decision on Thursday if we're able to move forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Peterson?
Thank you, Melanie. I know that it's a small value we're talking about here. I understand that. But I'm concerned about if this is really designed fairly. One of the questions I do need to ask, these are all sincere questions, but is there an early return policy that they can't return it before a certain time frame, or can they bring it back at any time? How does that work, the bleachers?
I believe the agreement right now is structured is that if we are in need or interest of using them for ourselves for an upcoming event or an opportunity, we can ask for them as a one-time use, or if we want to terminate the agreement and take the bleachers back as a whole, we can ask for them at any time with proper notification in order to have the bleachers returned if we find that there's a use for the town.
Well, yeah, so we have to give them notice when we want them. I'm talking about the other way around. And mainly the reason I am is I'm hearing the idea of our consideration is we have freed up storage space. But you can't make use of freed up storage space if you don't know how long it's going to be freed up. Because you have to leave it there for this potential item that could come back at any time. I mean, so I'm just wondering if that's going to be any real consideration if we don't have some requirement that they give us notice within a certain time frame, or that they can't. I don't know. I'm just wondering about that.
Mayor, Councilmember Peterson, I believe in the agreement it says that they actually, I'd have to review it. If we ask for a requirement on giving us notice to have them returned, I don't believe we went into the agreement with the intention of that.
Mayor, if I might.
Please.
I don't know. We're sitting here talking about pennies, and the Higley School District for the last 3 or 4 years has supported the Gilbert Veterans Day to the tune of about $5,000 a year in-kind contributions. And I called Melanie today because I thought it was a two-way IGA, and apparently the IGA that we approved recently with Higley Schools is one way. They give us stuff, we don't give them anything. And I think the long-term solution ought to be we make it a two-way street, because there are benefits. And Melanie, how many other events have they provided their stage for us at no cost?
Mayor, Councilmember Sens, I don't know if I could do that off the top of my head.
Several.
I believe several, yes. We have benefited from the use of their stage.
Including Nights of Lights last Friday?
I believe that's accurate.
Yeah. So I think the cost of transporting these, okay, I'll keep it clean, these stupid bleachers far outweighs the cost of the bleachers. I'd say give it to them and don't even worry about it, ever getting them back. What do we want them for? So.
If the argument is that we owe them from some previous deals, then okay, then that would mean that this deal's not fair. We know that it's in their favor, but we're trying to repay them for something else. I don't think that's a good way of having healthy relationships, is to vaguely wonder if we're repaying some old debt of some deal that we accepted in the past. I don't. And we've talked about building good relationships. Well, in private relationships, that makes sense. I mean, we give without intending to receive, but that's our private selves or our private property. We have the right to do that, and that's important for healthy relationship. But this is not private. This is public. And even in business, it's not good to kind of give here so that you can take there. That's a very destructive way to do business. I don't think that's healthy. I would go back to trying to make sure every deal is fair. I'm not sure this one is. This is what I was suggesting. Look, anytime you rent something, you're going to pay to transport it. That's normal. You go to the store, you get the item, you bring it home, and then you have to take it back when you're done. That's normal. You're not going to get a credit for that. That's just what you're going to do. And then you're going to pay a rental fee. And I've never heard them credit me for the empty space that I left because the item wasn't on the shelf. I don't know of that. Here's what I would suggest. I would suggest that there's very little chance that we need to make use of this property. But in the case that we do, that they would agree to bring it to wherever we needed it. That's all I'm saying. I know there's not a lot of value here, but again, we're not really getting anything, especially if we don't have that guaranteed open space for any time. So I would suggest at least that one change. It's minor, but I think it would be more fair.
Mayor, Councilmember Peterson, in number 4, we do identify that either party should give 30 days notice, and the district shall transport or pay the cost of transporting the bleachers to a location designated by Gilbert. So if we do choose to either terminate the agreement or want the bleachers back as a final, they are responsible for the cost of transporting them back to our location at our request.
On the phone earlier when I asked you this question, you said that we'd have to go get them if we wanted to use them while they had them. Is that not what I'm hearing now?
Mayor, Councilmember Peterson, this was for the end termination agreement piece. If we want to utilize them for a one-time event, we did agree to the stipulation that if we were going to take them for a one-time event, we would come and get them at our cost or the event activity promoter cost and then have them brought back to them. It wasn't going to be at the full termination of the agreement. We wrote in if we needed use of them during the time that they were on their property as a one-time event.
I understand at the end that they have to transport it. That's normal with any rental. You're going to return it when you're done with it. I'm talking about in the middle. And I think since there's no other consideration, it would make sense. I know they're throwing something into the deal with that, and there's very little chance we'll need to use it. But in case we do, we have the asset, and we have a way of getting it back to ground zero so we can make use of it without additional expense. I just think that would be more fair.
Councilmember Cook?
Hello. Do any of the districts, do they actually want these bleachers for themselves? Have they made any requests that they might want to keep them permanently?
Mayor, Councilmember Cook, the Higley School District, when I was speaking with them, they were, did ask the question on whether or not our intent was to have them returned within a year or if there was a time frame. I indicated at this point in time, we did not have a time frame in mind, mainly based on the fact that we weren't sure how certain events or developments may come forward in the town of Gilbert, so we kind of left it open. If you're asking on whether or not they'd be interested in purchasing them for long-term, we did not begin those discussions at this point.
Because I'm thinking these bleachers have been around for 20 years. Maybe as a return on the investment, we probably have gotten our return on investment on it, and there's probably not much value in this. I mean, I'm wondering if they might just want to keep those assets if they're really no cost to us anymore.
Mayor, Councilmember Cook, that may be their interest. Again, based on the fact that they have been utilized for Gilbert Days in the past, and we were not sure how the rodeo may progress in the future or what the status of that event is, we left this kind of as a loan agreement at this time until we have more details for what we may need or have an interest in future use, but felt it was best to get the use out of, or somebody could get the proper use out of them in the meantime.
And if down the road, if Rodeo Park were to return, I'm thinking we might secure net new bleachers instead of 20-year-old bleachers. Would that be a possibility?
Mayor, Councilmember Cook, that would be a possibility.
I mean, I'm thinking maybe we can just transfer the assets if they're not, of any value to us. If the market value is literally, zero, why not transfer the assets?
Please.
I would favor a sell of the bleachers. I think that's better. I mean, but I don't want to give them away. It's not our right to give away public property. We shouldn't do that. We can give away our own private property, but we shouldn't do that with public property. So whatever the fair value is, I have a hard time believing $145 is it. I'm sure we spent a lot more on them than that, and they have the same basic utility they had when we bought them, I'm sure. But, I would favor that over back and forth deal.
So we can move on. On Thursday night, we have heard what we needed to, and I think to keep options open, I'll be recommending that we, if you want to suggest some tweaking, but we leave it as is. But that's a consideration that could be made as far as transfer. But I think for right now, just because there's some unanswered questions, let's leave it that way. Thank you. Let's go to number 10, and number 10 is our foreign trade zone. And do you need a short presentation on that, or is it a question?
I have a brief question, I think. I'm reading the agreement, and as I understand it, the way this is set up is that there will be no local tax. There's no reclassification, no local tax benefit to this for orbital sciences. But I don't understand the mechanism very well, and so I just wanted to ask Susan, it says in the agreement that that would be a violation of our operating agreement for the reclassification to take place. But what does that mean as far as how does that relate to the foreign trade zone status? How does it affect that?
I believe it says it'll be a violation of the operating agreement that Orbital has with the City of Phoenix. This is a City of Phoenix, it's not called a subphone, it's a use-driven site. But the operating agreement is between Phoenix and Orbital, and they can revoke it if they violate the agreement, and this would be in that agreement.
So would that remove their ability to operate under a foreign trade status if they violate that term of the agreement?
That's my understanding.
Then I'm totally fine with it. I think this is very well written. I'm grateful for everyone's work on it. I think it protects, the fair playing field of everyone paying the same local taxes, and also it allows people who are improving the value of imported goods through foreign trade to be able to not be dinged for bringing in parts and pieces from overseas, which I think is also good. These are good on economic principle and free markets.
Thank you.
So I like it.
While we have one of our great business partners standing, Dan, you could do an introduction, or please, and for town leadership representing Orbital Sciences, please. We'll do an introduction.
Sure. Mayor, members of the council, we have before us today a representation from Orbital Sciences, a gentleman by the name of Chris Keeler. Chris Keeler is providing oversight for the foreign trade zone designation. And with that, I'll hand the mic over to Chris.
Thank you, Dan. Mayor, Town Council, appreciate the opportunity again to come back and speak. As always, any questions, I'm always willing to support. And going forward, we're still excited about the foreign trade zone. We're making excellent progress on our side of making preparations, and we're ready to press on to the next phase.
Thank you. We continue to talk about Orbital Sciences every day, and what a great asset it is for Gilbert and those satellites that are being built, and part of our STEM technology and the leadership you provide. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Cooper, agenda item number 11.
Thank you, Mayor. Quick question, well, maybe not just a quick question, but I was kind of hoping for a little bit of background on this since we are kind of, in essence, accelerating the CIP and using contingency funds. And I just wanted to make sure I was understanding it completely. And since it's on consent here, I wasn't sure that it would get as much of a presentation Thursday. So could you just give kind of a background there? And I may have a couple of quick follow-ups.
Mayor Lewis, Councilmember Cooper, item number 11 is for the authorization to advance two CIP projects, PR06 and PR11, which both are trail projects, one along the Heritage Trail, which is along Consolidated Canal. It's for the improvement of a trail system from Warner up to the Western Canal. And then PR11 is along the Western Canal, just west of Cooper to our boundary along Chandler. CIP has been working with SRP this past several months to identify some trail projects that could potentially be advanced. Staff has recommended the following two projects, primarily for two reasons. There's scallop portions of the trail projects or trail system along these two corridors that tie into regional trails that we'd like to get improved. One is actually scheduled and programmed for FY15. The second reason is primarily SRP has made a change to their aesthetic program, which now includes trail system and trail projects and aesthetics and art elements as part of a reimbursable item as part of the program. In the past, historically, has been only really for underground infrastructure and the conversion from overhead to underground that we've been able to use that fund for. So this revenue stream is now becoming available to the municipalities that participate in the program. So we married that revenue opportunity or fund opportunity with the projects that we like to complete as part of the trail system.
Thank you. Will the SRP reimbursement funds cover not only the 334 that you're asking from contingency at this time, but also all the other funds that may be required for the actual construction?
Mayor Lewis, Councilmember Cooper, that's a good question and probably should have been explained in the council communication. Yes, design and construction is 100% reimbursable through the aesthetic program. So we will be, but as it stated, it is a reimbursement. We do have to cash flow it in order to get it.
And just for my general knowledge, is the SRP fund an annual appropriation, or is there a different term?
No, Mayor Lewis, Councilmember Cooper, it is annual. It's based off their annual gross revenues for their geographic boundary of the municipalities that participate in it. It's typically about 0.8% of their gross revenues, or up to $12 million is how it's currently being assessed.
And then final question on this, you do mention a grade separated or at grade Union Pacific Railroad trail crossing, which is not part of this project, but it's mentioned in this because it's somehow kind of related, or it's in the neighborhood, if you will. Is there anything you could say on that?
Mayor Lewis, Councilmember Cooper, yes. There is a scope item identifying the communication, which we are performing under this, the PR11 project. There has been not an issue, but there has been some coordination effort with UPR of what can be done on the trail system at the crossing between Gilbert Road and Cooper. The PR11, we're going to use as the instrument to fund the feasibility study of what type of crossing we could do, whether it's a grade separated or an at grade crossing at that intersection.
Mayor.
Vice Mayor Sens?
A couple things to add to that, or a question first. What is the total balance of the aesthetic funds that we have available to Gilbert right now? Do you know?
Mayor Lewis, Vice Mayor Sens, the available funds for the aesthetic program is just over $6 million.
Okay.
Currently, that we only have 3 projects identified on the aesthetic program, Power Road being one, and then 2 substations that we intend to replace the chain link fences with perimeter walls.
Okay. The other thing that I don't think is mentioned in here is that this completes a circular path of the bike trails, and I think once it's completed, it'll give us about a 25-mile loop, is what I've been told. So, and I'm sure Councilmember Cook's probably going to do all 25 miles at least once a day. And one thought, you know, the UPRR crossing there at Neely, there's 2 issues there. One is the trail that crosses, and then the other is the parents that drop their kids off on Neely and allow little kids to go across the railroad tracks to the Neely Traditional Academy. So I think I would ask that as you go through this, consider working with the school district as well and see how we can incorporate something safer crossing of the tracks for the kids as well. So, because I'm sure the parents are going to continue to drop them off on Neely, south of the tracks. So that was an issue when we met out there.
Yes, good suggestion. Thank you. Helpful suggestion. A safe suggestion. Anything else? Councilmember Cook? We're talking about biking.
Well, thank you, Vice Mayor Sens, about mentioning PR 11, because I travel that fairly regularly and look forward to, you know, breaking it in for you when you get it done.
Mayor Lewis, Councilmember, we expect to get it into place as quickly as possible for you.
But we'll have a ribbon cutting, and you can ride your bike through it to break the ribbon.
But you mentioned a really great point. Obviously, the railroad crossing, there is one part of that canal trail which obviously is not very safe. Anything that can, you know, obviously accelerate the plans for that would be wonderful.
Thank you. I'm going to jump to the public hearing. I realize, as we've said, we'll try and minimize public hearing discussion, but on 19, Saturday morning, there was a large community event that included snow fights at the northwest corner of Higley and Baseline. And one of the restaurants that was there supporting the community event had their grand opening yesterday. And I said that I would invite the council to go check out, I guess it's pronounced Zappones, And Councilmember Cooper and Councilmember Ray, since you live nearby, if you could lead the way, let us know how it is, but I've heard it's great food. On the others, this is not looking for a detailed explanation, but I think as the council, as we continue to review the public hearing items, Mike, if you could come forward on 20, Susan on 21 from your mic, and on 22, Eric, just to give us that 30-second overview as to why some of these changes are taking place, just so as we're reading it, the council can be alerted. So Mike on 20.
Mayor, council members, item number 20 is the annual update to the general plan. The last time we had this, it was the 10-year update that actually went to the voters. And the feeling in the planning department is if we start looking at this on an annual or maybe at least every 2 years, that we will have less of a large process and less amendments to do on the 10-year track, which is required by state law. So what we have is really a lot of update information in terms of population numbers, rankings. We also have updates to maps. We've added a fire station. We've added a public facility down on Riggs for an SRP substation. We have added an alternate modes map for transportation, which was missing from the 10-year update because we just didn't have the ability to look closely at that public transportation element. And the timing also is a lot better now for that because MAG has completed its commuter rail study. So we've included that map as well. And the others really are just update items, and there is one item that was required by state legislation for us to address aggregates in the land use element of the plan.
Thank you. And Mike has confirmed what I wanted to emphasize, that when we have changes to the general plan, we want the community and citizens to be aware of it, to know about it. But in this case, and it is public information, so we can encourage the citizens to look at it, but it's more information, population updates, I'll even phrase it maybe logistical matters to the general plan, and not anything that we need to make sure citizens are spending a lot of time studying and reviewing. Is that, and not that we don't want them to look at it, but is that a acceptable summary of what this agenda item is?
Yes, Mayor, that's correct.
Thank you.
Mayor,
please.
One quick comment. If you look in the council communication, this has also been vetted through the Planning Commission.
Yes.
As part of their annual process. So, in fact, they initiated it and then voted on it in November. So,
thank you. And I wanted to emphasize, just because of the significance for the citizens, and as the 7 of us are representing citizens, it's not that there's anything that we really need to make sure that they saw, but we're still inviting them to look at it. So thank you for that reminder on the Planning Commission. On agenda item 21, Susan, give us the quick overview on 21.
Mayor, members of the council, prior to the last August retreat, the council asked us to review the entire town code and determine whether or not there are outdated provisions or provisions that should be updated. This is the first of a series of ordinances that will come before you. Most of the changes were discussed at the August retreat. Most are just cleanup. There were some conflicting provisions. I would like to point out a couple that are more substantive. Section 1-44. Gilbert has a council manager form of government, and one day I went and looked for what I know is in every code that has a council manager form of government, to look for the provision that says that the council will act through the manager in dealing with staff, except for purposes of inquiry, and it wasn't there. So I made a note in my file that I keep regularly for code updates, and I added that, and I believe that was discussed at the council retreat. The amendment to 1-63 is simply a cleanup. We had a situation where the vice mayor resigned. He wasn't removed. She wasn't removed. So I just filled in resigned as long as I was doing it. We updated it to conform to your current practice regarding study sessions and council meeting nights, which is changed from the prior provision. we, on the boards and commissions, the council had requested, not at the retreat, but at a recent meeting, that members of boards and commissions shall serve on no more than one board or commission or committee at one time. So that was added since August. I have a request from one of the assistant twos that I call to your attention some reasons why, as a policy matter, this might not be a good idea, and I said I would present that if the council wanted. She pointed out that there are potential drawbacks, for example, and there's 3 of them: loss of information sharing between boards and commissions. There may be beneficial information sharing by members if you have overlap. In the future, the town may not receive qualified candidates from the community, but may already have qualified applicants serving on a board or commission. That would be an argument against. And finally, that the council already has the ability to limit appointments of applicants to multiple boards without making a code change. Those were some concerns of staff that I promised to bring to your attention if the opportunity arose, and it did.
Thank you.
And then finally, actually, those are all of the substantive changes, and I'd be happy to discuss any of them.
Thank you. I think that's very helpful for the council to have heard that in preparation for Thursday. And it's not that I don't want to have discussion now, especially if there are questions that will help us in preparation. But as far as discussion, let's wait for Thursday. But Councilmember Peterson, do you have a question, something to clarify?
It's really, really quick. On the section 1-117, I think it's written backwards that it should be effective 30 days after the approval, not after signing. That would be consistent with the statement that the mayor does not have separate approval authority, but maybe I'm wrong. It doesn't make sense to me the way it's written.
I'm not sure I understand.
At least in your summary, and I haven't studied this in full, but we can leave it. I'll talk to you after, but anyway, it's fine.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
Mayor,
you.
real quick comment.
Please, Vice Mayor Sins.
Susan, in item 163, just to politically correct, we have his removal instead of his or her.
The protocol of the code is, and it's set forth in the construction section, is that he will include both genders. So we don't say his or her and he or she every time it comes up. But we can change that.
Thank you. Agenda item 21, Eric, quick overview. Or 22, excuse me, Eric, a quick overview.
Mayor, council members, a quick overview is we just have a few updates. The first is to Article 1, Section 62-2, which deals with the speed limits within town. And as we were reviewing this, we noticed that not everything matched up with the infield conditions as far as with new construction and some of our arterials being lengthened. So we did some cleanup to match what's actually out on the ground with our signage. And then also one of the changes we made was for school zones. We separated school zones out into high schools, and then also middle schools and elementary schools. The way our current wording reads is the school zones start at 7:30 and end at 4. Our high schools, most of our high schools start at 7:15 or 7:20. So we moved the high school zones to 7 o'clock, 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. The other cleanup that we did was repealing some policies related to bicycle dealers. We don't regulate them, and then also at the request from town council, as part of the required safety equipment for bicycles, we removed some wording about headlamps.
Thank you. That will help us in our preparation. Any additional comments or questions? Thank you. Melanie, let's continue. Let's go to 23. I think the council's up to date on this, but again, in preparation, give us that 30-second.
Mayor, council members, item 23 is looking again at the split of the HR cap into the HR Commission and the ACT Board. Both subcommittees met with council members to review the powers and duties and provided suggestions as noted in the council communication. And those are presented for Thursday night, as well as our request for appointment of current interested board members as to which commissions they would like to serve on moving forward, which would take effect February 1st based on the approval on Thursday night. Then that is the date that the ordinance would become effective, and therefore the terms were kind of reset for all of the current serving board members, taking into account that only 1/3 of the board that we want to lose at a time. So their terms were set based on what they're to match as closely as when they were going to currently expire, but with a new start date of February 1st. And that's what that addresses.
Thank you. And one reason for that quick overview, when we get to agenda item number 3 on the study session, there's a question that ties to this. So I'll press the pause button. While you're still there, let's do one last item, 26. 26 is the policy discussion, and this goes back to the use of council chambers, and I know town leadership had requested clarification, so there's a policy in front of us. One question I have, and then I will share with the council why I asked this question. This policy will say that council chambers is only to be used for town business, and let's say there is an event. And here's an example where a couple of years ago we had to support maybe it was 4 years ago, there was a housing seminar of those that were struggling with homes and possibly going to lose them, and so we did an event here at council chambers. I don't know if that became officially designated as a town-sponsored event, but could something like that, would we just, what would make it a town-sponsored event so it doesn't have to be too complex? Something like that.
Maybe I should answer that, because you just adopted an ordinance that clarified what town-sponsored events are, and that's where you expressly designate something as a town-sponsored event, so it doesn't just happen by accident. And that was done to clarify any responsibility and liabilities that you might have. So if you expressly, I guess, we hadn't thought about extending it to something like, it should be something that's related to the town, and that's your town-sponsored event, if you expressly designate.
So if we had something like, and very helpful reminder, because to clarify again what a town-sponsored event is, we've recently had that discussion and come up with a policy statement. So in the future, if we have an opportunity to use council chambers based on this policy, if a housing event or something that we could provide community input that might be helpful, we would struggle. We would not be able to use council chambers. We would look to room 300 or another place. What if we wanted to televise it? Well, we could probably get cameras up in 300, but I'm asking the question for flexibility. What would we do at that point? If we see a valid use for council chambers and it's not going to be a town-sponsored event, it seems like we have no options.
There are lots of spaces. I don't want to get into the policy decision, but there are alternative spaces where you're not conducting business, and the goal was to reserve council chambers as a policy matter. Would there be an option? The policy wouldn't permit it. Right.
Mm-hmm. So I'm becoming more uncomfortable with that myself, and I don't necessarily have an answer yet, and maybe that's why I brought it up to the council. Councilmember Peterson.
Mayor, I share that concern, and I do so without knowing all the events that it may affect. I wonder if staff, and I don't know if there's a great record of this or not, but if we could go back for the last 2 or 3 years or whatever's convenient and look at all the events that were here, and then have the policy applied to see which ones would not have been allowed, then maybe that would help us understand if that's really meeting the desire that we have as a council for what the policy should be. So that's a suggestion.
Well, one that you attended the Constitution seminar, and
I was thinking the Arizona Central debates that have been here too. I mean, I don't know how many have been there, but I know one because I was in it. So, but I don't. I think,
that would be a good
I think
example.
Citizens appreciate that opportunity too, though, to hear from candidates and things. So, but I don't know. I mean, I think if we look at the list, it might.
Melanie, with debates as an example, that wouldn't necessarily be considered a town-sponsored event, would it?
Mayor, council members, no, and my understanding is we do not have a record of events that have taken place in the council chambers in the past, other than the ones I know kind of came through the special.
I wonder, and maybe a suggestion just came, that this policy was discussed with town leadership, and there were reasons to put it in place, really to protect the town and the council. But I just wonder if there could be this policy and maybe just another short phrase of something in effect, or a community event that would be approved by the council.
What our recommendation is, and it's a consistent recommendation over the years with respect to the use of town property by third parties, is that there be specific guidelines for how you make those selections. It's not just for your friends, it's evenly applied across the board. So we were trying to, we thought we would be avoiding that, but it can certainly be developed. And
so a couple of things. If the council, because we've got on the agenda, if it looks good and we move forward, we can certainly vote on it on Thursday. If maybe from this discussion it's to say it looks good, but don't completely shut the door. If there's a good option or something that comes along, do we have some way to add some verbiage that would give us that ability?
we'll take it.
Well, let's do this, Susan, so we can move on. Take a look at it. If you have a suggestion by Thursday, great. If not, we can just continue it because we don't have anything urgent that causes us to say it has to be done by Thursday. Okay, thank you. So for the council meeting, anything else we missed? Let's move to agenda item number 2 on the study session, which is the update on the class and compensation study.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of the council. Carrie Bosley, HR Director for the town. Item number 2 is an update on the class and comp study, as the mayor indicated. And just to set the stage here, back in May of this year, council awarded the contract to Fox Lawson and Associates to conduct a class and comp study. The actual results will be, they're on track and due to be presented for the December 20th council meeting. Due to the large the complexity of the study and the volume of information, we thought it would be beneficial to bring Bruce Lawson and one of his consultant team members, Lori Messer, to provide some preliminary report outs to talk with you about, or to share with you the framework as it relates to our comp and class philosophy. So with that, I will turn it over to Bruce.
Thank you, Carrie. Mayor, members of the council, thank you. I appreciate the time on your agenda to go through the status. I think a copy of the presentation was given to each of you earlier this afternoon, and so I'm assuming that you've all had ample time to read it in its word-for-word detail. So I'm kidding, obviously. There are certain parts that I'm going to spend a little bit more time on than others. But the presentation is focused on what the study task, the project parameters, the job evaluation process that we use to deal with alignment of jobs, the classification study, very briefly a discussion of pay for performance, where we are on the compensation study, and then what the next steps are going to be. When we started this process several months ago, the objective was to develop a recommended job classification structure that dealt with identifying potential for career progression, a job evaluation study that looked at jobs internally so that we were able to deal with the internal relationship of each of the different jobs using a structured tool that the town adopted called the decision band method of job evaluation. We would be conducting a custom salary survey consistent with the adopted philosophy, and just as a reminder, a copy of the philosophy that you adopted back in February was provided, and I'll make reference as we go through the the presentation this evening. But the survey itself has been completed. We are literally at the point where we're taking all of the data, and there is an awful lot of it, and feeding it in, just trying to figure out what's there. We're right at the point where we don't even have it all into the system yet, so we don't really have any meaningful conclusions, but we are going to have those for you when we're back with you in the next 2 weeks. So we'll have the draft final report on schedule as planned. The study itself has been conducted consistent with all of the professional standards that we are obligated to follow as we go through the process. I'm not going to spend a lot of time just talking about the data scrubbing. Those are things that you can read at your leisure, but the point being is we go through a very rigorous process to make sure that the data is accurate, that we have an adequate number of data points for each of the different jobs. We're required by federal guidelines to have at least 5 matches or we can't use the data, things of that nature. And all of the data that we have collected has been adjusted geographically to Gilbert, so we've taken that into account as we've gone through the process. In terms of pay for performance, we've, as part of the job classification work, we identified potential competencies that could be used for each of the various jobs. We've also dealt with the issue of assessing the benefits program as part of the process. Looking at total compensation is spelled out in the philosophy and strategy, and we will be laying out some various implementation strategies for you over the next couple of weeks. Just a couple of quick reminders in terms of the philosophy. The council adopted a philosophy that said that broad job classifications would be utilized to facilitate simplification and flexibility. Just by numbers, when we started this process, and I'm going to round the numbers just for simple arithmetic, you had roughly 240 job classifications. The structure that has been proposed and the town staff has signed off on and that will be subject to approval, obviously, as part of the whole system, there are about 60, or a 75% reduction in job titles in the overall structure. That does not eliminate positions. It does not change what people are doing. It just simply cleans up the job classification structure. The total compensation approach has been used as we've gone through the market assessment, and ultimately the town will be able to make judgments as to where individual jobs fall within that second and third quartile of the market. Some jobs, you obviously, as we discussed back when you were adopting the strategy, do not necessarily need to be paid at the 50th percentile. You have large numbers of applicants, you have a good recruiting pool, and you're able to pay it somewhere in the second quartile. Other jobs, you may need to pay in the third quartile just to deal with competitive situations and other matters. A couple of key points in terms of pay structure, and I know that based on some of the questions that have come up from employees as we've gone through the process. We're basically building 2 separate pay models. One is for public safety jobs and one is for civilian jobs. One of the big issues that people tend to get confused by is the public safety structure. The top step of the pay structure is considered the market rate for those jobs. And the philosophy that was approved says that for public safety jobs, employees can move through the pay structure up to the market rate, and that's the end of the game. They don't get paid over market. They can be paid up to the market, the prevailing rate, as it were. For the civilian jobs, the market rate is the middle of the structure, and there is some space above that where the town would be able to reward employees who contribute above and beyond normal expectations. But on balance, the salaries will approximate the middle of the structure. So in order to pay people above the market, you have to have people below the market. So it's important that employees understand the distinction. It is not treating one group better than the other, or one group is being disadvantaged at the expense of the other. Both structures are tied to market. The difference is that the civilian structures allow for some flexibility, whereas the public safety structures simply don't, because it's the norm in that industry. So I just wanted to make that clear as we go along. that in terms of pay advancement in all structures, performance, the town adopted a philosophy that said that performance would be the primary consideration, that employees would have the right to progress based on growth in performance and so on. It's not just seat time and longevity that would allow them to move forward. And the town obviously is working on that as a separate initiative, but this feeds into that process. I'm going to spend about 90 seconds on the job evaluation methodology because I think it's something that might be of interest to you from a policy standpoint so that you'll also understand some of the jargon, as it were, that will come back in 2 weeks. You'll understand some of the terms. The methodology that we're using is called the decision band method of job evaluation, and it's really based on the premise that every job exercises some degree of authority and responsibility. We can measure the degree of authority and responsibility, and we use that as the primary basis for determining the level of a job in the organization. There are 6 effective bands, as it were, for compensation purposes, bands A through F. And just from a simplistic standpoint, if you think of a standard 12-inch ruler, each of these bands is mathematically about 2 inches on that 12-inch ruler. These are very wide groupings. They capture a lot of jobs in each of the different categories. But in terms of the work that is performed by town employees, Band A jobs are those jobs where the work is prescribed. Employees are limited in the amount of discretion that they can exercise as to how the work is done. They have very limited control. They can control the manner and the speed, but they don't control the work itself. It's qualitative as opposed to the how. In the trades, very simple. These are your entry level through the semi-skilled types of jobs. And in the technical and admin support, the parallel types of jobs exist all the way across the organization. Band A level jobs are always FLSA, Fair Labor Standards Act, non-exempt. There's no basis for exempting an A level job from the overtime requirements spelled out by the federal government. At Band B, we're talking about effectively the skilled or operational jobs. These are jobs within the organization where the employees are expected to have the full breadth and depth of knowledge to perform all of the different elements of the work. They don't control how the work is done, but they would be expected to know what to do, when to do it, and how to do it under differing circumstances. And again, in most cases, these are non-exempt jobs. At Band C, we're talking about jobs that our term is process, but these are the jobs that the federal government defines as professional. They would fall into the administrative category. They qualify for exemption under Fair Labor Standards, so these are going to be your professional level jobs. And the employees would be expected to exercise independent judgment and discretion in how they do the work and so on. At Band D, we're talking about mid-management type jobs. These are people who take the broad programs that are established at Bands E and F, and I'll talk about those in a moment, but figure out how to put the rubber on the road. They figure out what resources are necessary. They would be recommending precedent. And quite frankly, these are your mid-management level jobs within the organization. Band E level jobs are going to be your senior executive group. These are people who run the major lines of business, as it were, your major departments and functions of city government, but they are the jobs that plan the strategies and programs and so on. And at Band F, we're talking about positions and jobs that determine the overall scope, goals, and direction of the town. There, quite frankly, are only 2 groups of jobs that fall in that category: the council and the city manager, or the town manager. And all the others will fall into the other 5 bands. Every band is divided into a couple of grades, and then there are some what we call subgrades. And so when you see a rating, you'll see a number or a letter and some numbers. And I'm not going to spend any time, in fact, unless you want to go back into it. But the numbers have very specific meaning, and a job has to meet certain criteria to be at a particular level. But the bottom line is that we've designed this so that there are dual career tracks. You can have a position that might be a supervisor of other professionals, let's say, that would fall into Band C and be in what we would call a grade 5, which unto itself means nothing. But you could also have a very highly technical, non-supervisory position that would be ultimately paid the same as a supervisor who doesn't have those skills. You can have a dual track. So the entire model is designed around giving the town the flexibility to move people as appropriate based on the work that you are hiring them to do. We look at authority, how much authority people exercise, both structurally, and the term that we use is sapiential, but it simply means by virtue of knowledge or wisdom. You do have jobs that exist in the town that you create because you need people with certain knowledge-based skill sets, and you hire them for their expertise. They may not have structural authority to make a decision, but you hire them because you need that expertise, and so we can rate a job accordingly. And then the subgrading process is that fine-tuning, which is that quarter-inch piece on the ruler, as it were. So when it's all said and done, we potentially can end up with, if we ever needed it, up to about 30 pay ranges from the bottom of the structure to the top. But the reality is we typically end up with about 15 to 20, just because of the compression that exists between the lowest and the highest paid employee. So that's where we're going. Let me just take a couple of minutes to just run you through the class structure. I mentioned that we've gone from about 240 job classes down to about 60. I'm not going to go through and read all the class titles, but you're going to basically see all 60 in about 15 seconds. Just looking, for example, in the admin support series, 4 levels. Very broad classes. Some of them will cover multiple pay ranges to allow for different skill sets. In the court series, the one thing that the reason I want to just spend a moment here, you're going to see a term that's a standalone class as opposed to, on the prior slide, level 1, level 2, level 3. In the policy, you said we wanted to have career ladders where possible. When you see a series that has level 1, 2, 3, and 4, those structures have been built to accommodate potential career growth. In classes where what we call standalone classes, there is simply one level of work that exists for that body of work. There is not a need for a lower level or a senior level. It is what it is. And there's not a direct career path for that job. There are other jobs that people could qualify for, but there's not necessarily multiple levels. In the engineering series, 4 levels. Fire, we didn't change the rank structure, but 4 levels. Physical, 4 levels. IT, 3. Inspection, 3. In legal, there's just a couple of standalone types of classes. M&O, there's 5 levels. We have a management structure that has 4 levels. Support, management support, 4. Non-sworn public safety, 5. In that grouping, a series of standalones and so on. So the important thing I want to emphasize is that it's a real streamlining. It gives the town tremendous flexibility as you have jobs that change. You're not going to have to be going through reclassifications of individual employees. You'll be able to do what needs to be done from a managerial perspective without necessarily changing job classes. It becomes the pay issue, which is what drove a lot of things. On the pay for performance side, we've provided a number of recommendations to your staff as they work through the enhancement to the pay for performance or the performance management system. But we've recommended the use of a 3-level rating scale. How a lot of those things come into play as the employees and management go forward with that. Every job will have standard core competencies. There will be competency dimensions. There will be annual objectives, cascading goals from the top down. Obviously, we want to be able to identify how every employee fits into the overall organization. They should be able to identify what their contribution is whether it's a maintenance worker or a department head. Everybody ought to understand what their contribution is to helping the town achieve its goals. And if you can't define that, then there's something missing. So we think that that will be a big help. We've talked about the job rate as part of the strategy discussion. The job rate is effectively what the prevailing market rate as it's set in the structure. That employees will be able to move based on their full functionality as they grow. That every employee should be able to get to the job rate, assuming they're functioning fully in the job. And that was a major policy decision you made back in February. I think a lot of this stuff is just repetitive of things we've already talked about in the past. In the survey, we did survey about 48 benchmark titles out of the overall group. It was roughly 30% of the jobs in the town, representing about 50% of your workforce, and that was just something we want to make sure that we captured a large segment because that's a representative sample. We looked horizontally and vertically to make sure we covered all the different groupings. The market study did address the parameters that you've specified in your policy document. Similar sized organizations, similar markets. We've collected private sector data where it's appropriate, and as I said, we're going to be integrating that data over the next week to 10 days. We actually had a pretty good participation rate. I think you're going to be pleased with the results in that respect. Obviously, a number of private sector data sources were used, and this just simply recaps the list of the organizations that we looked at. The matches in the survey. The federal guidelines require that we match about 70% of the body of work so that the matches are solid, and we're very comfortable with that information. And as I said, when we come back to you in a couple of weeks, we'll have more detail on that. So that's where we are. Some next steps, and Mark or Carrie, I'll defer to you to talk about the next steps.
Great, thank you, Bruce. So on December 20th, staff will be bringing forward a request for council action to accept the study results. Between December 24th and February 21st, we will go into discussions around implementation strategies and sustainability plans. We also have the wage reopener per the GPLA and IAFF MOUs. We will begin those discussions the week of January 21st. And then based on those discussions, we will, no later than March 7th, we plan to have a request back to council for action to consider any recommendations to compensation. And then from there, we will be working on, continue to work on the performance management aspect and then also all of the changes, the technical changes that we need to do in the system to go live with new job descriptions and whatnot for July 1st of 2013. And with that, we'll answer any questions.
So December 20th, we'll have an item to approve, the study results. We may be involved in some dialogue, but it would be March 7th after a lot of discussion, internal analysis, that the council would again make approval of the total package.
That is correct. We do need time to, we're going to be getting the data towards the end of this week or maybe next week.
Next week.
We'll be getting it right, as we go into the deadlines for the December 20th council meeting. And with that, we'll need time to review the data and get a true understanding of what the implementation impacts will be.
Thank you. Councilmember Cook?
Can you explain why February 21st is there instead of January 21st?
I would be happy to.
Because I'm thinking, not to say you have received the data, but it seems like I would like to move through the process a little faster. And maybe it might be broken into a couple tiers. where you might be able to identify some of the folks in the organization that might be below the water line. That's fairly easy to do.
Right.
I don't know. It just seems like if you can do this in little pieces sooner before you fully implement, I don't know.
Until I have the data, I can't give you a firm, yes, we can do it sooner than, the time frame outlined. We will need to look at the data, look at the impacts. There may be positions where they go from non-exempt to exempt. What's the cost implication? Maybe overtime costs are already occurring, that maybe it's a neutral. Looking at vulnerability of positions, looking at where, those discussions with both the executive team as well as the employee organizations. We do have a commitment in the current MOUs for GPLA and IFF to convene in discussion for the wage reopener. The commitment there is within 30 days of the results given to council on the 20th of December. We will be going into conversations or discussions around compensation. Those conversations have to be completed within 30 days of the meet and confer. So with that, we committed, to go into those discussions the week of January 21st. To back that up a little bit, we have an executive session with council, in preparation for the discussions for meet and confer. We'll also, we're going to be working with budget, getting financial data as far as what the availability of funds are. So there's a lot of behind the scenes that we need the time. If I can expedite it, I will, with staff.
Councilmember Ray.
So if as a council on March 7th, it's determined that there should be a change in pay for some of the individuals within the town, will that change not happen until July, or would it take effect sooner to March 7th?
That will be included in the recommendation. Again, I don't know what the impacts, what the study findings will be.
Sure.
The results of the findings, the implementation, I don't see that as a peanut butter, across the board. It's going to be based on where positions are, within the market. Again, the goal is to be at the market rate, and how do we get everyone into that new house? How do we get them into the range, get them closer to market? What can we do? Can we do it all, immediately? Can we do it 1 year, 2 year? All those conversations will be occurring. So,
okay. I would hope that we can get it as close to March 7th as possible. I think that would be the best case scenario.
And if conversations go quicker, we'll be back sooner than that, definitely. Anything you want to add?
No, you answered it.
Other questions or comments? Bruce, thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll look forward to seeing you.
We'll see you in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Agenda item number 3 on the study session says discussion and possible direction and updates on the process for selecting board and commission members. There is a document that is part of the study session packet titled Council Subcommittee on Boards and Commission Application Screening, Interview, and Selection. The reason why this is a tie to agenda item number 23 on Thursday night is that as we have made the decision to divide our HR CAP commission into 2, so we will have our HR commission and our ACT board, which ACT standing for Arts, Culture, and Tourism Board. There will be a number of interviews. About 3 months ago, there was some discussion in efficiency of council members of a potential of some cities and communities do not do as we're doing, where all 7 of us interview candidates for boards and commissions. And I have not had detailed discussion with the council. I know there has been some discussion with town leadership, and the feedback I've received is that some council members would be in favor of maybe making some changes, others, and I know as a council we do appreciate meeting with the citizens, interviewing them, getting to know them, and that's a positive. But some of the, well, most of the communities we've talked to don't have all 7 council members do the interviews. One example is where they have maybe 3, And another example was it was really the mayor and the liaison to that board that would, well, let me back up. The councils in that particular community, they do the same process we do, that all applications are reviewed by council members. There's a screening that takes place, and then once that screening has a short list, then it might be the mayor and the liaison that meet together and come up with a decision. The council still, as we do today, would have a chance to vote on that, where it would be presented in a council meeting so that it starts out with all the council, ends with the whole council, but the council's not involved in between. So we could talk about anything on this document, but the specific reason for including it was, as our town clerk's office is looking at scheduling a number of interviews for the HR Commission and the new ACT Board. Do we want to just continue as we've done and have all 7 of us? Is this a time, as we start a new year, to make a change in that process? And there's many variations of what I've just suggested. And some of you may have talked to other communities and have those to present. But let me ask that open-ended question. We can have some discussion. Keep it the way it is right now. Or would we like to make a change, and maybe, and it could even be with a change that we have 2 or 3 involved, and the rest of the council could be invited, and then it would be optional. Those are many options that could be considered. What are some thoughts you have?
Mayor Lewis.
Councilmember Daniels, please.
This is something that I looked at extensively with other communities as far as efficiency when it comes to their boards and commissions, and recognizing that in Gilbert we like our scale council and an opportunity to interview those individuals who are applying for boards and commissions, sort of aids in that spirit of small town. I appreciate that, but I also recognize the time and energy and effort that's being spent by staff to coordinate these, and then also by council to conduct these interviews. And I recognize, too, that over the years we've interviewed many of the same people over and over and over again, many of which have been put on boards and commissions, and some of which, unfortunately, have not. And so in the spirit of those discussions, I would like to see us perhaps try something a little bit different, keeping our the ranking ability that we have, where we as a council have the ability to look at all of the applications that come forward and rank them as we have previously, and then allowing perhaps the mayor and the council liaison in consultation with the staff liaison. Sometimes those staff liaisons know and understand better than we do what is specifically needed on a board or commission as far as providing balance or some other level of expertise. So having those types of discussions ahead of time, we as a council will always have the opportunity to vote and to make our voices heard on who that final recommendation is in our actual council meeting. But those are just a few of the thoughts that I had just about cutting down our time and staff time.
Thank you. Councilmember Ray.
Councilmember Daniels, I hope you can hear okay. I have a question about your idea. Are you proposing, or are you hoping that the liaison and the mayor would do the interviews, or that they would just take the scoreboard or scorecard of the individual from the entire council, review that, and then make a recommendation?
I think that can be at their discretion. I think that they'll have the finalists, if you will, based on what our ranking sheet recommendations have been. And if they feel like they need further information or they'd like one-on-one interviews with individuals, I think that that's certainly in their purview. They could even perhaps make a phone call rather than having a formal interview set up. But I think that the council liaison and the mayor, along with the staff liaison, are very likely in better positions. And some of us who haven't served as liaisons to boards and commissions, here we are in a position to interview. We get a good sense of an individual, and we also get to understand and obviously meet some of the benefits, meet some of our citizens. but I don't necessarily think that we're in the best position to make those appointments, either not knowing exactly what's needed on those boards and commissions.
So one suggestion that's coming out of this is more involvement with the staff that have been meeting with the boards or commission members and would have an opinion as to what skill set would be needed. And I think that is a very positive comment. Councilmember Peterson?
Mayor, I appreciate this discussion. I was reading through the suggested language in the packet. I really favor kind of the way it's written there, which is that interested council members could be involved. And the executive session process, I think, is very valuable. It's the right place to be able to have these interviews, and you know, some of the sensitive concerns that you wouldn't be appropriate in public related to staffing decisions make sense there. And so I wouldn't want to eliminate the ability of other council members who may have input. Maybe they previously served as liaison to a board, or they know something about some actions or things that went on. I would want them to be able to be involved at that level. So I don't know if I want to remove that idea of the interested council members involved in the interviews. So
would you like to try, though, maybe it's not all seven could come, but it would be streamlined. Although excuse me for pausing, if, as Councilmember Daniel said, if it's to the discretion of the mayor and the liaison, they may or may not conduct a formal interview. And if they did, then it could be communicated. The rest of the council could come. If they did not, and they just had discussion with the town staff member and made a decision, would you be okay with that?
I think if there weren't going to be interviews, we weren't going to have that executive session process, I would like for there to be some mechanism for other council members who aren't either the mayor or liaison to express their desire for one, so that some issues could be discussed if necessary. But I don't know how that's built.
I think that option, though, is available through the ranking sheet. And I think that's where we all get an opportunity to weigh in. I see that sort of being part of the checks and balances, is that the council as a whole represents the general philosophy and then, you know, conveys that through the individual that's chosen. If we're going to go ahead and schedule interviews with all of the people, then from what I'm hearing, Councilman Peterson, you'd just like to keep things exactly the way that they are. I see a need and also a way that we can sort of streamline this process. So that's my effort.
Councilmember Cooper?
I appreciate the opportunity to look at this in a new light, fresh light, and I have been thinking about it. And one of my concerns with changing is I feel like the questionnaires that we have do provide pretty good information, but I can't tell you how many times I have been surprised or enlightened or just felt like I learned something very important through the interview process that was very helpful to me in accepting or making a recommendation for a certain position, and I don't know how to get that any other way. I think our current policy allows for, like it says, interested council members to come, and so if it's a burden on a certain council member's time at a certain point, at any point, if they're not able to be there, it still can go forward. And so I've thought about this both ways, and I really feel pretty comfortable with the process we have, and maybe it's just because I haven't seen other cities, but this is the way that I feel like I get the best information.
Councilmember Peterson?
So the problem with the ranking sheet as being the control is we as council members, at least I don't see how the final rankings pan out. I don't know who's at the top of the list, And I'm not sure we can do that outside of some kind of a posted meeting. It becomes conversation between us. Because of that, I don't know who may be likely to be appointed. Therefore, I may not be able to express concerns that would be appropriate for an executive session. So I just don't see a mechanism for that without having some kind of a ability to have an e-session and have some way of knowing if you want one. So I don't know how to solve that yet. I'm still processing this.
Susan, I'll give you a hypothetical. And listening to Councilmember Cooper, the one option, we just don't make any changes. But if we did, to try it out, and I actually would say, as this council knows me, I like meeting with people, would like to have a position for everyone that wants to serve. And yet, from an efficiency standpoint, I didn't realize that other communities don't do as we're doing and have interviews. And so that, I think, goes back to, as Councilmember Daniel said, it's that small town appeal that we love. And so I'm willing to give it a try. And so here's the question: if we made a switch, we do the rankings. And so, Susan, this is what could happen: is the rankings could be shared with the council, let's say from staff members, so we're not comparing notes. And it could be stated, the mayor and the liaison will now take this short list and make a decision. If you have opinions you would like to consider including, please notify, let's say it's Vicky by such and such date. And if we have 7, well, let's say we have more than 3, that would probably trigger to have an executive session posted where other council members could be invited and to do the interviews. If we did not have input, that could give the mayor and the liaison the ability to move forward, either to conduct interviews or to just make a decision. It still comes back to the council that if the liaison, well, at a council meeting, the liaison would state for the whole council to hear a name that would still be approved by the council. Does that work?
I think so. I understood it. Just a minute.
And our town clerk gives some input, which is helpful. Thank you.
Is your hypothetical that what you suggested is in place of the subcommittee that does the interviews?
To make sure I answer that properly, let me go back. So we do a ranking, and the ranking takes a large number down to a small list, and that small list would be shared with all 7 members independently, so an email or a communication would go out from town staff. So we haven't discussed at that point. If council members looking at that small list that would be then reviewed by the mayor and liaison to move forward, they'd be given a date, and let's say today is Tuesday, maybe it's by Thursday. Let Vicky know if you have a desire to be involved in discussion about this. Thursday comes, Vicky has 1 council member, and then the mayor and the liaison would know that to include, let's say it's Councilmember Cook in a discussion, because he had some input. Does that work to that point? And if it does, then if more than 3 want to participate, then I think that triggers having an executive session and going back to the regular interview process. So it's giving 2 options.
I still ask my question. What Kathy was pointing out was that you currently have a subcommittee of 3. I always understand this would replace that process, and that was my question to you.
Okay.
You wouldn't have the subcommittee interviews. It would be the mayor and the liaison, unless it got expanded because of some concerns or questions or comments of another council member.
Now I understand your question. So it seems like, yes, it would replace the subcommittee.
Okay. Then I think that works.
Okay. And whether it works for the council, but at least it's an option that we could try. Councilmember Peterson?
I love that, so long as it's compliance with open meeting law. The part of it that I don't understand, Susan, you can help me with, and we've had lots of discussions about open meeting law, but the rankings, we've all sent in our rankings. I guess they're anonymous, and maybe that's why it won't be a violation, but sharing the results of our input with each other, does that not become some kind of a meeting or conversation between council members?
Well, that's one of the reasons I was hesitating for a minute. The other was I'm not assuming they're anonymous. I'm also assuming that those rankings are public records, because they are. So you've got public records, and you've got a council member who has signed on to them. I don't think are they anonymous now? I don't exactly know that part of the process. Okay. So you've got, I don't think so. I don't think so, Victor. What is your concern?
Mayor Lewis, members of the council. Currently, the way the process works is the council ranks every applicant. The people you interview is determined by the highest rankings. If someone were to come in and request those as a public record, they would be provided as a public record. But I will tell you that would be considered a transitory record. So once we're done with the interviews, we dispose of that as a transitory record. We do not keep that for any particular length of time. Once the interviews are done, we can dispose of the rankings.
And so currently, the council, individual council members do not see those rankings. They don't see those rankings?
Mayor Lewis, members of the council, that is correct. You do not receive those rankings, but your current process says you will interview 2 times the number of openings. So based upon the rankings the clerk's office takes, if there's 2 openings, the 4 highest ranked people will be interviewed.
One item that I would suggest, I don't think the 7 of us need to see the rankings and know the details, but it would be if 10 people applied and the short list takes it down to 3 and we're selecting 1, that's what I'm envisioning, is that the 7 of us would see these are the 3 names that are on the short list now. Mayor and liaison will now be moving forward. Do any of you have comments that you feel like you need to be involved in the selection of the 3 candidates?
You know, I think that's okay. I was a little troubled by everybody seeing and seeing all the rankings, but that problem seems to have gone away. I think that works. Let's see how it unrolls, and I'll let you know if there's any problems come out.
Town Clerk Kathy?
Mayor Lewis, members of the council, the one thing that I would point out is when you do interviews in executive session. So if you decide you want to be involved, and there's going to be more than 3 members of the council, we are required under the open meeting law to provide notice to those people where they can request that interview in public meeting. So if you decide to follow this process, depending upon the timing and when you're going to be able to meet, it may push your appointments out further than they are now, because we do have to have that notice, you know, so that we can get letters out to the applicants so they have adequate time to notify us they wish to be interviewed in public meeting and to be able to post that meeting.
And
Mayor,
Councilmember Daniels, please.
I apologize. Sorry for interrupting. It's I'm not watching while I'm listening, so it's a little tricky. It sounds to me like in an effort to simplify our process, we might be making it a little bit more complicated. So perhaps we need to reevaluate how we do this. And if the subcommittee, if a formal subcommittee is not going to be chosen, and or if we're still going to be continuing with interviews, perhaps we should leave the process exactly the same as it is right now until council members are willing to give up a little bit of the control, which seems to be some of the, and not just the control. I understand that the interviews do provide us some extra insight. What I think has happened over my experience is that we've interviewed many of the same people over and over and over again, and it's almost a formality rather than an actual exploratory process. And so I was trying to help us mitigate some of the formality of the interview and just allow us to get to know these individuals and to see if they are the best fit for our boards and commissions. But it doesn't sound like that's a road that everyone's willing to walk down right now.
Councilmember Daniels, and it may be helpful to have other piece of input, but my sense is that it might be worth a try of having this option, because if we start the process and it's the mayor and the liaison that end up making the decision and the process is working, then I think the council will be comfortable with it. And there may be an exception here or there. And if it's not working, then I think that triggers us at a future date to say, that didn't work, let's go back to the old method. So I'm willing to give it a try, and it may just work beautifully, I'm not sure, but at least it would be worth trying out. Councilmember Peterson.
Mayor, I agree with you, and I think as long as there's that mechanism for any one of us, if we have concerns, to be able to voice them, I'm fine, and I would like to try it, and maybe most of the time we don't even have to go through the extra posting and everything else, because mostly there won't be concerns, and I expect that will be the case. So I think it's worth trying as well.
So Councilmember Daniels, your suggestion of improving efficiency may still happen, and yet, Councilmember Cook or Councilmember Ray, do you have any thoughts? And it might be the question, looking around, even back to Councilmember Cooper, where I appreciated what you said, that you'd probably prefer to keep it the same way. Would you be willing to give this a try?
I'd prefer to keep it the same way.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Cook?
I'm actually in favor of Councilmember Cooper of keeping it the same way. I haven't found it to be a burden for me to show up, but I'm trying to understand what efficiency are we really going to improve here by going to this other process. I mean, if it means that the mayor and the liaison potentially eliminates an interview time block, as it relates to staff doesn't attend our executive session. We do as a council. So I'm looking for really, what are we trying to solve here?
Sure.
I don't know.
As was mentioned, it does also save a lot of staff time in coordinating and so forth. Now, I'm not lobbying to talk you into trying it, because I like it the way it is. It's just that the feedback that came is we are one of the few communities that does it this way, and so all of a sudden I'm thinking, that's interesting, but
now,
what I'm hearing, though, you like to keep it the way it is.
Well, if it means, like, I know how busy you are, if you are out of the process to free you up, I'm okay in having that change.
Sure.
If that's something that allows you to do other things, you know.
And was stated, the other item that we can realize is that for all 7 of us, if there's a time we cannot come for interviews, if there's a quorum, it proceeds without us, and that has worked fine too. So, any other comments? Kathy?
Mayor Lewis, members of the council, one thing I would point out with your current process is when you established yourself as this subcommittee for interview and selection, you identified that it only takes 3 members to have a quorum. So that was to recognize that some of you may not want to participate. The other thing is this meeting is run by the vice mayor. So, you know, there's nothing that necessarily requires the mayor attend or another council member. If you also look at the process, one of the things it shows is there's certain boards that all the council is encouraged to participate in the interviews, such as the Planning Commission, the Design Review Board. But there's other boards, not that they're not as important as the others, that probably aren't as high profile, that list that, you know, it's up to the council members if they wish to participate. While we would need 3 to have a quorum, it's totally at the discretion of the council.
Thank you. So, some good ideas to think about. What I'm hearing from the council today is to leave it the way it is. Councilmember Peterson?
Mayor, I'm in favor of keeping the interviews or doing interviews as needed. I'm just definitely not in favor of the elimination of the call for interviews by council members. That side I can't support.
Thank you. Thank you for the discussion. Before we end the study session, to confirm on Thursday night, we are doing interviews at 5 p.m. And there will be, and this is new information, an executive session that will be posted, and that will begin at 6:15. There will be an agenda item also added to the town council agenda that will be posted tomorrow, and we'll get more information on that. And any questions then about Thursday night? So once we arrive here at 5, we're here for a little while. But with the great efficiency of the study session, it could be, let's see, what time I was going to say could be. Let's just leave it at that and say thank you for your service. Thank you for those who participated. Study session adjourned. Now, what does it say?